Hi everybody, it's Booker season, Booker domination. The Booker Prize is coming soon into our living rooms, into our reading chairs, into our reading bookish world. It is July the 3rd, that means in 29 days from now, on Tuesday the 1st of August, the Booker Foundation will announce its long list for the Booker 2023. And that implies that a lot of people out there will focus their reading solely only on the Booker Prize. They will read the entire long list. Many of my wonderful booktuber colleagues out there will read all the 13 books, will make 13 single reviews, and until the prize will be announced, I think in November, they will not do much anything else than reading Booker books. I am not going to do this. Nevertheless, I'm also interested in the Booker Prize because with all the awards, for me, the Booker Prize, the National Book Award, the Giller Prize from Canada, the International Booker, the Women's Prize, I am always looking very critically at all the books that are longlisted for these awards, for these prizes, and I try to find out when I read the description, when I hear a little bit about this or this book, am I really interested in doing this? Am I really interested in reading this? And I can tell you that, I was never interested in all the 13 books and all the 16 of the Women's Prize and all the 12 of the Giller and all the 10 of the National Book Award. But I was always interested in 3, 4, or 5, maybe even 6 or 7 books of these lists. So that's what I do with awards. I use them as advice to reading, as an offer, but not as an obligation to read each and everything that is announced there. Some of my wonderful colleagues out there have already done their predictions for the Longlist 2023. I think first out was Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, the guy from Australia who reads 257 books each and every year. That's almost a utopia for me, at least. But Scott has done his prediction, and he did it in a very academic, a very scientific way. He looked at the jury of this year's Booker Prize, and which is headed by Adjei-Brenyah from Canada, and he sort of looked, what are these authors going to like? What has Adjei-Brenyah blurbed herself, which will definitely make its way to the long list? Well, will it? I don't know. And I don't think that it is so easy to look at the jurors and then say, okay, they are going to like Asian books, books with more Asian influence. They are going to like more queer books. So I think the jurors have a lot more perspective, a lot more to take in, and they will take that in because that's why they are picked as jurors. Gemma of Gem of Books did her list yesterday. I think I mostly agree with Shelley Swearingen, with that beautiful Dutch-sounding name at Shelley's, who has declared that she is very likely not reading all of them. So that's what I'm going to do as well. And now it should be interesting, which books is Shelley going to read and which books am I going to read? Well, we're going to tell you that in our respective videos after the long list is announced, of course. Kieran from Kieran Reader and Alyssa from Nerdy Nurse Reads did a wonderful dialogue together yesterday, Sunday. I recorded this on Monday, and talked about the books that they would like to see on the list. And Ben at Ben Reads has done a very beautiful video as well. He has grouped the videos together, like in the big stars, I'm making that up now, the indies from independent publishers and other categories, where he sort of sorted listed the authors and the books that he thinks will make the long list. Well, now here comes my list of the Booker. This is a mix of books that I have read. It's a list of books that I would love to read, that I would love to see on the Booker list. And there are some titles as well that I think, well, they sound so Bookerish, they look so Bookerish, that the Booker jury is going to love them and put them on their long list. I do not put the books in groups like Ben did. I put them just in alphabetical order by the last name of the author. A Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo published by Canongate on February 9, 2023. This is named as a dazzling story of modern Nigeria and two families caught in the riptides of wealth, power, romantic obsession, and political corruption. She shines her light, the author, on Nigeria, on the gaping divide between the haves and the have-nots, and the shared humanity that lies and lives in between. A book that was talked pretty much about. I read an interview with the author earlier this year, and I think this is a very good candidate for the Longlist, because it needs to be diverse, right? The jury has, apart from their own sympathies, apart from their own interests, to look to give you a list, to give us a list of 13 books, or 12. The Booker dozen is 13. A list of books that is diverse, that sort of reflects the variety of Englishes out there in the world, from United States and United Kingdom, of course, hopefully even Australia and Africa and India and all the countries where we have authors who write English novels and English texts. The second book comes from the United States, and this is Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, published by VOXER on July 13, 2023. It comes out in the UK first in like 10 days from now. And this is about two top women gladiators who fight for their freedom within a depraved private prison system not so far removed from America's own. In CAPE, or CAPE, prisoners travel as lings and chain gangs, competing in death matches for packed arenas with righteous protesters at the gates. Chain Gang All-Stars is a kaleidoscopic, excoriating look at the American prison system's unholy alliance of systemic racism, unchecked capitalism, and mass incarceration, a clear-eyed reckoning with what freedom in this country really means. So this book is about the private prison system in the United States. I think that a huge part of the American prison system, 30-40%, are private. So that you can make money, you can make $1 million or more dollars by investing in the prison system, by become an entrepreneur who deals with prisoners, And the more prisoners you get, the more money you make. That's the American prison system. And after slavery ended in 1865, like 20, 30 years later, the American prison system had a huge influx of African American men who had to work. They had to work for very low wages. And you could call it a continuation of slavery. And so this book is very interesting. Chain Gang All-Stars. The next book is a Booker book. I think it's a bookerish book. And it's also by a publisher, published by a publisher. It's not by a publisher, but published by a publisher. Right, come on. That had, I think, 3 or 4 titles in the International Booker. This is the long form by Kate Briggs, published by Fitzcarraldo Editions. That's the publisher, on April 12 in 2023. Helen and her young baby Rose are awake. It is first thing on a new morning. They move, they rest, they communicate. Rose feeds. Thoughts and associations travel far beyond the remit of the front room in their rented flat, which they pace and which, alive with them, continually becomes new. Their delicate balance is interrupted by the delivery of A History of Tom Jones by Henry Fielding, a novel which describes itself, semi-seriously, as inventing the novel form for the very first time. As the morning progresses, Helen starts reading it. Indirectly, and each in their own distinct ways, Helen and Rose start thinking about it. Its claims to newness, its length, its essayistic digressions, its invitation to imagine old and new forms of life, writing, and experience. The long form, Wyndham Campbell Prize winner Kate Briggs' long-awaited debut fiction unmakes and remakes the novel to meditate on very real social issues. From housing to caretaking to friendship, laying bare the settings and support structures that make durational forms of coexistence first thinkable, then possible. At once acrobatic and deeply attentive, the long form insists on the creativity inherent in everyday life, showing how the acts of social compositions are continuous with the acts of artistic composition. It is a brilliant novel of profound contrasts and productive codependencies in which the small details of a day speak to the largest questions of form, responsibility, continuation, and love. What if this is not a Booker book? This is the definition of a book for the Booker Prize, and that's why I think it will be on the long list. Next book will probably not be on the long list, but I was really overwhelmed by reading it. Comes from the United States again, from Los Angeles of the early 1980s. I read it earlier this year. I was fascinated. It has a feverish atmosphere. It is, on the surface, a thriller, but more, it's also autofiction. It is a memoir of the early 1980s with a beautiful soundtrack. You have to follow the Spotify list if you love 1980s music. It is The Shards by Bret, Easton, Ellis, where the author has his alter ego, Bret Ellis, who is a young student, 17 years old, at a very prestigious, rich, posh high school in Los Angeles, and his friends and this new guy, this new pupil, Robert Mallory, who comes and sort of changes all the relationships in his clique, in his gang, with the people that he's dealing with. And there's also a serial killer, and it's really, really intense atmosphere, about 560 pages. The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis, which probably will not be on the list, but which I think would be good on that list. Next one hasn't been published yet. It comes on September 12, and it will be published by Riverhead. And this is The Vaster Wilds, the new novel by American superstar Lauren Groff. And this has been called a taut and electrifying novel from celebrated best-selling author, that's what she is, Lauren Groff, about one spirited girl alone in the wilderness trying to survive. A servant girl escapes from a colonial settlement in the wilderness. She carries nothing with her but her wits, a few possessions, and the spark of God that burns hot within her. The Vaster Wilds is a work of raw and prophetic power that tells the story of America in miniature through one girl at a huge point in history to ask how and if we can adapt quickly enough to save ourselves. And that makes it a very timely novel that can also be read by looking at our time, the time we live in, where we will have to adapt to a lot of things, where we already have to adapt to climate change in a horrible way. The next one goes back to the United Kingdom, to London, England. I think so. This is London, England. This is Mr. by Guy Gunaratne, published by Tinder Press on May 25 in 2023. When Yahya Bass finds himself in a UK detention center after fleeing the conflict in Syria, he has many questions to face. What was he doing in the desert? Why does he hate this country? Why did he write the incendiary verses which turned him into an online sensation and a media pariah? His interrogator, wants to keep him locked up, so he decides to tell his life story on his own terms, following a child that Easton made who becomes the unwitting voice of a generation. Mr. is also the story of a quest for a father and the discovery of another way to live in the shadow of war, bracing, tender, and exuberantly imaginative. The next book is the favorite of the favorites. It's maybe a book that is published only once in a decade. The next book has already won the Pulitzer. It has already won the Women's Prize. But it would be sort of a big miss by the Booker jury if they really are looking for the best book of the year written in English, if they would not at least longlist. You know what I mean? Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, published by Faber and Faber on October 18, 2022. That's 18 days into the Booker season, when books are eligible for the prize from October 1 to September 30. What do I have to say about Demon Copperhead? It's a great novel. It is a modern day version of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. It follows the structure of that novel very, very accurately, but it also is a story of its own. It's about this boy born in a trailer home to an 18-year-old drug-addicted mother in Appalachia, and his life that is actually not supposed to last longer than the 20 years or something that her mother has lived. But he's a survivor. First I got myself born. That's the first line, the punchline of the book. Demon Copperhead, a great story. I wonder if they're gonna make a movie out of this. I guess so. I guess that Barbara has already sold the film rights for a 7-figure. I don't know, but tell me in the comments down below if you know anything about that. Masculinity is very important because masculinity is something that we haven't read so much about in recent years, but it still sort of troubles the world. It still engages the world because half of the population of this planet are men. And what about their masculinity? Close to Home by Magee from Northern Ireland, I think, deals with this question. It was published by Hamish Hamilton on April 6 in 2023. Luminous and devastating, a portrait of modern masculinity is shaped by class, by trauma, and by silence. But also the courage to love and to survive Belfast. There are two guys in this book, two brothers, and one brother goes to study at university. He's supposed to make an academic career, but then he suddenly comes back to where he come from, to that working class environment. And one night he is losing control and assaults a stranger at a party, and everything is tipped into chaos. Drawing from his own experiences, Magee examines the forces which keep young working class men in harm's way in a debut novel which shines with intelligence and humanity on every page. Close to Home is an extraordinary work of fiction about deciding what kind of a man you want to be and finding your place in the scarred city that you call home. Number 9 is a book that I'm currently reading, and I really want this guy to be nominated. I had the choice between two books that were in a way similar, although they play in different times, although they are written by a woman and a man, but both of them play in London mostly. Or it was Fire Rush by Jack and Crooks that was shortlisted for the Women's Prize earlier this year, which I decided then against, in favor of Small Worlds by Caleb Azumah Nelson, Caleb's second novel published by Viking on May 11 in 2023. This is a book about a young man of British Ghanaian descent. His name is Stephen. He's a dancer, he's a musician, he plays the horn, and we meet him in this book, in this novel, in 3 summers in London. This is so much London, this is so much Peckham, a place in London, an area in London which has been called the Lagos of Europe, I think. Peckham is a very African, British, Caribbean part of town, and in this area we meet Stephen, his first great love, Dell, and what Caleb Azumah Nelson is so capable of is sort of to catch romanticism, love, first love, shyness and affection in a very beautiful and tender way. He really can describe this like almost no one else. And the parallel to Jacqueline Crooks is that we also have a kind of story in that book by Jacqueline Crooks. That's the Magee and Moses, which is a first love story, also very beautifully depicted. And something else that both books have in common is their affiliation, their love of music and the soundtrack. The soundtrack that is really a bit different. It's dub music, but it's more jazzy in Caleb Azumah Nelson's book. Small Worlds by Caleb Azumah Nelson. And number 10 is another book that I finished for the Women's Prize. It was longlisted and I was pretty disappointed that it didn't got shortlisted. This is Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. It is published by Fourth Estate on March 2 in 2023. And this is a very small one, 200 pages, about a Vietnamese family who is part of the boat people of the great exodus of refugees from Vietnam in the late 1970s. A great family with 9 people, but only 3 of them are going to make it to England. 6 others will die on the way to freedom and on the way to liberty. And this is about the survivors, but also about the ones they had to leave behind, about grief, about integration in the new country, about racism in the new country, about the difficulties to establish a life and how it went after all the decades with different voices, beautiful voices that Cecile has found in this book for her characters, for her story. In a small and short novel, she has really managed to condense great things, and I really think you should read it if you haven't done so. The next one is going to take us to Barbados. This is River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer, published by Headline Review on January 19 and 2023. The master of the Providence plantation in Barbados gathers his slaves and announces the king has decreed an end to slavery. As of the following day, the Emancipation Act of 1834 will come into effect. The cries of joy fall silent when he announces that they are no longer his slaves. They are now his apprentices. No one can leave. They must work for him for another 6 years. Freedom is just another name for the life they have always lived. So Rachel runs. Away from Providence, she begins a desperate search to find her children, the 5 who survived birth and were sold. Are any of them still alive? Rachel has to know. The grueling, dangerous journey takes her from Barbados, then by river, deep into the forest of British Guiana, and finally across the sea to Trinidad. She is driven on by the certainty that a mother cannot be truly free without knowing what has become of her children, even if the answer is more than she can bear. These are the stories of Mary Grace, Micah, Thomas Augustus, Cherry Jane, and Mercy, but above all, this is the story of Rachel and the extraordinary lengths to which a mother will go to find her children and her freedom. Number 12 is on a couple of other prediction lists, and this could be really one of the favorites for the Booker Prize. The House of Doors by Tan Tuan Eng, published by Canongate on May 18, 2023. This is from the best-selling Booker Prize shortlisted author of The Garden of Evening Mists, a spellbinding novel about love and betrayal, colonialism and revolution, storytelling and redemption. The year is 1921. Leslie Hamlin and her husband Robert, a lawyer and war veteran, are living at Cassowary House on the Straits settlement of Penang. When Willie, Somerset Maugham, a famed writer and old friend of Robert's, arrives for an extended visit with his secretary Gerald, the pair threatens a rift that could alter more lives than one. Maugham, one of the great novelists of his day, is having long hidden his homosexuality. His unhappy and expensive marriage of convenience becomes unbearable after he loses his savings and the freedom to travel with Gerald. His career deflating, his health failing, Maugham arrives at Cassowary House in desperate need of a subject for his next book. Leslie, too, is enduring a marriage more duplicitous than it first appears. Maugham suspects an affair, and learning of Leslie's past connection to the Chinese revolutionary Dr. Sun Yat-sen decides to probe deeper. But as their friendship grows and Leslie confides in him about life in the Straits, Maugham discovers a far more surprising tale than he imagined, one that involves not only war and scandal but the trial of an English woman charged with murder. It is to Maugham a story worthy of fiction. A mesmerizingly beautiful novel based on real events, The House of Doors traces the fault lines of race, gender, sexuality, and power under empire, and dives deep into the complicated nature of love and friendship in its shadow. And now the last book, which is a hunch, not probably a Rainier book or a Rainier book, to quote the name of this channel, but it might be a book that the Booker Prize will love. It's a Bookerish book. This is the new novel, which comes 2 days before the deadline, September 28, 2023. Published by Hutchinson Heinemann. This is The Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang. A smorgasbord. Food crops are disappearing. A chef escapes her career in London to take a job at a decadent mountaintop colony seemingly free of the world's troubles. There, her enigmatic employer and his visionary daughter have built a lush new life for the global elite. One that reawakens the chef to the pleasures of taste, touch, and her own body. In this atmosphere of hidden wonders and seductive violence, the chef's boundaries undergo a thrilling erosion. Soon she is pushed to the center of a startling attempt to reshape the world far beyond the plate. Sensuous and surprising, joyous and bitingly sharp, told in alluring language, Land of Milk and Honey is a striking novel about food, sex, and the intricacies of desire and longing. And this completes my prediction list for the Booker 2023. What are your predictions? Do you agree with me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, or all of the novels that I have on my list? Or do you think, no, this is rubbish? This is rubbish. It looks completely different. Put your list in the comments down below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. Give me a like. Anyways, on August the 1st, we know more. And until then, you will get probably a couple more videos from me on this channel. Stay tuned. And for this day, bye.